Why this Viking brothers' DNA is so unique. Around 750 CE, 41 individuals lost their lives buried in two Viking ships at Salme in Estonia, and amongst them were four brothers whose DNA revealed who they really were, where they came from, and why the ship they were found on sailed across the Baltic. Groundbreaking DNA analysis of over 400 Viking skeletons from across Europe and Greenland has also revealed more about these brothers' origins and our understanding of Viking history. So what secrets were their DNA hiding? And what makes it so unique? Before we get right into it, let us know in the comments, how do you think the ships ended up buried in Estonia? Secrets of the first Salme ship. In 2008, workers had no idea they would discover the secrets of a long-forgotten era when they stumbled upon a burial ground. They unearthed human skeletons, iron swords, rivets, bone gaming pieces, and several other fascinating finds. Fortunately, archaeologists were summoned to the site just in time to conduct an excavation, and that was when a trove of historical artifacts was dug up. The artifacts, dated to AD 750, marked the transition from the Vendel Age to the Viking Age, and their styles had an unmistakable Scandinavian signature, setting them apart from the Estonian culture. As the excavations progressed, the remains of two ships were found, each holding secrets of the past. The ships, clinker-built and partially buried under stones and soil, had been deliberately dragged inland, and the archaeologists wondered about the circumstances surrounding their burial. One ship, unfortunately, damaged by building activities, revealed the remains of a rowing boat, approximately 11.5 meters long, with 6 pairs of oars. In this boat, there were skeletons of 7 tall young men, buried alongside 2 swords, spear and arrowheads, knives, a small axe, fragments of combs created from deer antlers, and 75 gaming pieces crafted from whale and cattle bone. The presence of animal bones suggested a funeral feast the survivors of the party most likely held, while the heads of 2 decapitated hawks hinted at the elite status of these young warriors. While researchers continued to wonder who the warriors were and how the ship ended up there, 2 years later, archaeologists made another groundbreaking discovery: the Salme II ship, burial and genetic legacy of the Vikings. They unearthed a second ship, Salme II, approximately 30 to 50 meters south of the first. Unlike the first ship, this one's scene was chaotic and filled with carnage. The skeletons on the ship even had marks of a brutal skirmish. A total of 34 individuals were found in the ship, which measured 17 to 17.5 meters long and 3 meters wide. Their bones had signs of multiple stab and cut wounds inflicted by sharp-edged weapons, which means they lost their lives in a fierce battle. Archaeologists suspected they were Swedish warriors who were quickly buried in their boat after a violent confrontation. As researchers from Tallinn University conducted archaeological studies and analysis of the bones, Marie Allen, professor of forensic genetics, and her colleague, Magdalena Buss, extracted and analyzed DNA from the remains. They aimed to solve the mysteries of the people in the graves. Were they related? And did they indeed hail from Sweden? Isotope measurements from teeth had previously indicated a connection to the Malar Valley. So Marie Allen and Magdalena Buss were convinced the DNA results of these remains would prove to be equally revealing. They were right. The DNA analysis revealed a shocking truth. One family had been particularly devastated by the violence. 4 of the 34 men stacked on top of one another in the Salme II boat burial were blood brothers. The remaining occupants of the grave also originated from the same district. This means they all hailed from a tight-knit community bound by ties of kinship and geography. To confirm the Swedish origins of the individuals, the DNA was compared with samples analyzed in other studies, and one of those studies was by Professor S.K. Willerslev. He and his team of researchers from the universities of Cambridge and Copenhagen spent countless hours extracting and analyzing DNA from the remains of 442 individuals, including men, women, and children, recovered from archaeological sites across Scandinavia, the UK, Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, Estonia, Ukraine, Poland, and Russia. The remains dating back to the Viking Age, which roughly spanned from 750 to 1050 AD, held secrets that would challenge the conventional image of the Vikings. The team's analysis revealed that Viking ancestry was not exclusive to people of Scandinavian descent, contrary to popular assumption. First off, 2 skeletons from a Viking burial site in the Orkney Islands turned out to be of Scottish ancestry. This finding was a significant departure from the long-held notion of a homogeneous Viking population. The team also uncovered evidence of substantial gene flow into Scandinavia from the British Isles, Southern Europe, and Asia, both before and during the Viking Age. But how did the gene flow happen? To answer this pressing question, researchers from Stockholm University analyzed genomes from around 17,000 Scandinavian individuals, including nearly 300 from ancient burials. This incredible journey through time revealed the genetic history of Scandinavia, and you won't believe the impact they had on the region. Tracing the genetic footprints of the Vikings. For starters, the researchers collected new DNA samples from several iconic Swedish archaeological sites. Sandbyborg, for example, was the site of a brutal massacre that occurred just before 500 AD, leaving behind a haunting legacy. Another was the Vendel Cemetery for Scandinavia's elite, featuring several burials contained in large boats, and it dates back between the 6th and 8th century AD. The team also analyzed samples from Viking chamber burials and remains from Kronen, a warship that capsized with over 800 men in 1676. Previous studies had already noted extensive migration into Scandinavia during the Viking Age. But this latest study, involving these different burial sites, clarified some of the details about this flow of genes into the region. The researchers found that movements of people from Western Europe had a huge impact on all of Scandinavia, while migration from the east was more localized, with peaks in the Lake Mälaren Valley and Gotland. Meanwhile, gene flow from southern Europe largely affected the south of Scandinavia. As the study spanned 2,000 years, the researchers were able to see the increase in migration during the Viking era was a significant event, but one that eventually came to an end. With the onset of the medieval period, migration started to fall, and the non-local ancestry that arrived in the region at this time began to fade away. The researchers also discovered that much of the genetic influence from Eastern Europe disappeared over time, while the Western and Southern influence reduced. This suggests that the legacy of the people who arrived in Scandinavia during Viking times did not last as we expected because they did not have as many children as the people who were already living there. Why didn't they, you might ask? Well, there are different possible reasons for it. Migration, exchange, and identity of Scandinavians. The migrants who arrived in Scandinavia during the Viking Age might not have intended to stay forever. They could have been tradespeople or diplomats who planned to return home after a while, or they belonged to groups that weren't allowed to have families or children, like slaves or priests. These are just a few possibilities that could explain why the genetic legacy of these migrants isn't as strong as expected. During their research, the researchers also noted that the DNA of modern Scandinavians changes gradually as you travel from north to south. This genetic gradient or cline is due to migrations into the region of people carrying shared genetic similarities, known as the Uralic component. You can find this genetic component in modern-day Sami people, Finns, and some Native Americans and even some Central Asian groups. The researchers discovered occasional instances of people with Uralic ancestry in northern Scandinavia during the Viking period and medieval times, but it seems that the Uralic influence increased after this time, with individuals from the 17th century sample having similar levels of this ancestry to people living today. This raises some interesting questions about the history of Scandinavia. We often think of the Viking Age as a time when Scandinavians were curious about the world outside their region, venturing out to explore and conquer new lands. But the genetic evidence suggests that the world outside Scandinavia was also curious about the Vikings. People from other regions were traveling to Scandinavia, leaving behind their own genetic mark in the region. As we continue to explore the genetic history of Scandinavia, we're constantly discovering new and exciting things about the region's past. It reminds us that history is always more nuanced and interesting than we might expect, and that there is always more to learn about the people and places that have shaped the world we know today. If you enjoyed this exploration of the DNA and history of the Viking ship warriors and the Salme Ship Brothers, whose discoveries changed how we understand Viking expeditions, family, and honor, then hit the like button. To stay updated on more ancient history and recent impressive DNA analysis on these ancient people, then subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next videos.